Strange tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese, Strange Tales from Liao Zhai. Today, I'm going to bring you a story called Chu. In the Shenzhen prefecture, there was a scholar named Shen, who, when he was about 16 or 17, studied at a temple under a teacher. At that time, the temple housed several students, one of whom was surnamed Chu, who claimed to be from Shandong. Chu was an exceptionally diligent student, almost never taking breaks. He often read late into the night and had never returned home. Chen and Chu became the best of friends, and one day, unable to hold back his curiosity, Chen asked, "Why do you work so hard? Even if you don't rest during the day, why stay up late reading at night?" Chu looked up, smiled, and replied, "My family is very poor, and I barely scrape together enough for tuition. If I don't make the most of every moment, then how can I get ahead? If I study just half a night more than others, over time, in 2 days, I'll have read as much as they do in 3. Chen was deeply moved by his words and even thought about moving his bed next to Chu's so they could study together at night. But Chu stopped him, saying, "Wait a bit before you do that. I think our current teacher doesn't have much more to offer us. How about we go find Mr. Louis near Fuchun Gate? He's older, but very knowledgeable, and he'd be a much better teacher for us. Why don't we move there together?" It turned out that in the capital, students at private academies paid monthly tuition fees. At the end of each month, after the teacher collected the fees, students could choose whether to continue studying with the teacher. Since it was just the end of October, Chen and Chu decided to move to Mr. Louis' academy at the beginning of the next month. Mr. Louis was a well-known scholar in the area. However, due to his poor family background, he had never been able to return to his hometown and had to stay in the capital, running a school. This, however, was not his true ambition. The arrival of Chen and Chu brought him great joy, especially Chu, who was not only intelligent but also had a remarkable memory. Mr. Louis highly valued him. The two of them studied together during the day and shared a bed at night, growing very close, like brothers. But as the month drew to a close, Chu suddenly asked for leave to go back home. Even after several days, he had not returned. Everyone found this a bit strange. One day, Chen went to Tianning Temple on an errand and unexpectedly saw Chu, who was busy slicing rami into thin strips and coating them with sulfur, making small fire-starting tools. When Chu saw Chen, he froze for a moment, then lowered his head, looking uneasy and ashamed. Chen walked over and asked, "Why aren't you at the academy studying anymore?" Chu grabbed Chen's hand, pulling him aside, and sighed. "I don't have enough money for tuition anymore. I had to start doing some small business to earn enough for a month's fees before I can go back to studying." Hearing this, Chen felt a pang in his heart and stood in silence for a while before finally saying, "You should keep studying. Don't worry about the tuition, I'll help you." He then had his servant pack up Chu's things, preparing to take him back to Mr. Louis' academy. Chu stopped him, saying, "Please don't tell the teacher about my situation. Just make up some excuse for now." Chen's father had once been a businessman who became wealthy through trade. Chen started secretly taking money from his father to help pay Chu's tuition. After some time, Chen's father noticed money was missing and confronted him. Chen had no choice but to tell the truth. When his father heard, he thought his son had become foolish and angrily scolded him, forbidding him from continuing his studies. Chu, feeling deeply guilty when he heard about it, decided to leave the academy and say goodbye to his teacher. Mr. Louis, upon learning everything, scolded Chu, saying, "Why didn't you tell me the truth earlier?" Then, he returned all the tuition fees that Chu had paid to Chen's father and told Chu that he could continue studying at the academy. He even treated him like family and invited him to share meals with him. Due to this incident, Chen no longer went to the academy, but he still often invited Chu to the tavern for drinks. Chu, not wanting to worry Chen's father, always refused, but Chen became more and more insistent, even tearing up at times. Finally, Chu couldn't bear to reject his friend and accepted Chen's invitation. 2 years later, Chen's father passed away, and Chen returned to Mr. Louis' academy to continue his studies. Seeing his eagerness to learn, Mr. Louis allowed him to resume his education. However, Chen had been away from the academy for so long that his knowledge lagged far behind Chu's. 6 months later, Mr. Louis' eldest son, who had been begging for money all the way from Zhejiang, finally arrived in the capital to see his father and asked him to return to their hometown. When the students heard this, they all chipped in to help prepare for his journey. Chu, feeling sad that his teacher was leaving, couldn't hold back his tears. Before leaving, Mr. Louis told Chen, "You need to learn from Chu. His knowledge is already enough to be your teacher." Chen, following Mr. Louis' advice, invited Chu to come live with him and teach him. Not long after, Chen was accepted into the county school and, using his neglected talent status, went to take the local exam. As the exam approached, Chen felt uncertain and worried he wouldn't be able to write a good essay, so he asked Chu for help, pleading with him to take the exam in his place. As the local exam neared, Chu arrived at Chen's house with someone, saying the man was his cousin, Liu Tianrua, and asked Chen to temporarily go with him. Just as Chen was about to head out, Chu suddenly grabbed him from behind, nearly making him fall. Liu Tianrua, quick on his feet, rushed to catch him, and the two of them left the house together. Once outside, Liu Tianrua looked around and then led Chen back to his own home to stay. There were no women in Liu Tianrua's household, so Chen stayed in the inner quarters. A few days later, it was the Mid-Autumn Festival. Liu Tianrua turned to Chen and said, "Today, there are many people at Prince Li's garden. How about we go there to relax and I'll also take you home afterward?" Liu Tianrua had his servant bring tea and wine supplies, and they made their way to Prince Li's garden. The garden was bustling, with crowded pavilions and a noisy atmosphere. They could hardly get in, so they walked to the water gate and saw a small boat under an old willow tree. They helped each other aboard and decided to have a drink on the boat. After a few drinks, they grew a bit bored, and Liu Tianrua asked the servant, "I hear there's a new singing courtesan at the Plum Blossom Pavilion. I wonder if she's free today." The servant left the boat and, shortly after, returned with the courtesan, none other than the famous courtesan Li Yun, known throughout the capital. Not only was she skilled in singing, but her poetry was also exceptional. Chen had once visited her brothel with a friend for drinks, so he recognized her. When they met, they exchanged greetings, but Chen noticed that Liao Yun seemed troubled. Liu Tianrua asked her to sing, and she began singing a morning song from the Western Han Dynasty, Hao Li. After hearing it, Chen felt uneasy and said, "Even if we two don't meet your expectations, you can't sing us songs meant for the dead, can you?" Liao Yun quickly stood up, forcing a smile, and then sang a more lively, flirtatious tune. Chen's mood lifted a little, and he grabbed her wrist, saying, "I've read your Washing the Stream poem many times, but unfortunately, I've almost forgotten it now." Liao Yun, hearing this, lowered her head and recited a new poem she had written. "With teary eyes, I gaze at the mirror stand. The curtain opens, and I see my sister-in-law stand. She lowers her head, turning aside, gazing at her green shoes. She forces a smile, gently unbinding the green butterfly, frequently wiping her fragrant cheeks with her red sleeves. Carefully, afraid of being misunderstood." Chen repeated the poem several times. At this moment, the boat docked, and they all got off, walking through a long corridor lined with walls full of poems. Chen had someone fetch a brush and wrote Liao Yun's poem on the wall. As the sky grew darker, Liu Tianrua said, "The people at the exam hall will be coming out soon, it's time to take you back home." So, he accompanied Chen back to his house. As soon as they arrived at Chen's house, Liu Tianrua said his goodbyes and left. Chen stepped inside and immediately noticed the house was pitch dark, and he couldn't see a single figure. He felt a bit puzzled. Just then, he heard the sound of the door opening, and when he looked up, he saw that it wasn't Chu who had entered. Just as Chen was about to make out the person's face, the figure suddenly collapsed in front of him. At that moment, the servant rushed over to help the person up, saying, "Young master is tired, please go rest." Chen then suddenly felt dizzy. Through his blurred vision, he realized that the person in front of him was, in fact, himself. When he woke up again, he saw Chu sitting beside him. Chen still felt disoriented, as though he were in a dream. He asked the servants to leave, wanting to figure out what had happened. Chu looked at him and said, "I'll be honest with you, don't be scared, but I'm actually a ghost." Chen froze for a moment, and Chu continued, "I was supposed to be reincarnated as a human, but I haven't left yet because I couldn't let go of our friendship. A few days ago, I possessed your body and took the exam in your place. Now that all 3 rounds are over, my wish has been fulfilled." Chen asked, "So, can you take my place for the upcoming exams too?" Chu shook his head and said, "Your father's life was short, and as his son, your fate can't bear too much good fortune." Chen felt a bit saddened and asked, "Then where are you going next?" Chu was silent for a moment before replying, "Mr. Louis and I had a father-son bond. I've always missed him and can't forget him. Luckily, my cousin is in charge of the records in the underworld, and I've asked him to notify the authorities there, hoping they'll help me fulfill my wish." After saying this, Chu bade Chen farewell and turned to leave. Chen found the whole situation very strange. The next morning, he went to find Liao Yun, wanting to ask her about the boat trip they had taken together the previous evening. However, he was told that Liao Yun had passed away several days ago. Chen was even more confused. He then went to Prince Li's garden and saw that the poem he had written on the wall the evening before was still there, though the writing had faded to the point where it was barely visible. It was at that moment that Chen suddenly realized those words had been written on the wall by his ghost, and the poem had been created by Li Yun's ghost. That night, Chu came to see Chen, a look of happiness on his face. He said, "The thing I set out to do has finally succeeded, and now it's time for me to say goodbye." With that, he extended his hand and asked Chen to write the character, Chu, on his hand as a keepsake. Chen wanted to host a farewell feast for Chu, but Chu shook his head and said, "No need. If you don't want to forget me, don't be afraid of the distance. After the exam results are out, come and see me." Chen tearfully saw Chu off. Just as Chu was about to leave, Chen noticed someone standing at the door, waiting for Chu. The person grabbed Chu and pressed his head down, and Chu's body instantly flattened. The figure then shoved him into a bag and carried him away. Days later, Chen was announced as having passed the exam and become a jurin. He quickly packed his things and prepared to go to Mr. Louis's home in Yu. Mr. Louis's wife hadn't had a child since their first son was born. But, unexpectedly, when she was nearly 50, she gave birth to another son. This child was born with his hands tightly clenched, never opening. When Chen arrived at Mr. Louis's house and saw the baby, he told Mr. Louis, "Look, the palm of the child's hand bears the character Chu." At first, Mr. Louis didn't believe him, but when the baby saw Chen, his clenched fists slowly opened, revealing the character Chu clearly in the palm. Mr. Louis was astonished and asked Chen to explain. Chen then told him the whole story, and Mr. Louis was both overjoyed and surprised. Before leaving, Chen gave Mr. Louis a generous gift. Later, when Mr. Louis went to the capital for the imperial examination as a tribute scholar, he stayed at Chen's house. By that time, Mr. Louis's youngest son was already 13 and had started attending the county school. The story ends with a reflection. It says, Mr. Louis opened a school and taught students, not realizing that the one he was teaching was his very own son. Alas, this shows that helping others can bring good fortune to oneself. It seems there's indeed a subtle connection between good deeds and blessings. Chu, before he could repay his teacher, first repaid his friend as a ghost. His ambition and character were as clear as day, and even in the form of a ghost, no one would find it strange. Alright. That's all for today's strange tale, Chu. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Feel free to leave your comments and share with others. See you again in the next issue.